Hello, this is Professor Kim Nelson, Jewelry Design Department at FIT. Going to do a tutorial on how to sketch and some basic curve math in Rhino. So I'm going to start here working in Rhino 6. First thing I need to do is to bring in an image that we are going to trace, and that image tracing is the best way to learn how to use your sketching tools and your curves from objects. So this is a good exercise. Going to the top report. Going to do picture frame. Going to pick our image. And I'm going to place it in the viewport. The size of it doesn't really matter. I don't like it being opaque like this. I don't like it being that strong. So I'm going to go to Object Properties, Materials, and I'm going to set the transparency to where I can see the grid a little bit through it and it's not so opaque. By the way, if you don't see these options, it's because your tab has it like this, your panel. So you can find it there. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put this on a layer I don't normally use very much. That way I can lock it if I don't want to choose it. I don't want to select it. I want to move this so that the image is fairly well centered in my viewport, around 0, 0, 0. It's a good idea to always model and draw around 0, 0, 0. Just going to draw vertical, both sides option, shift key to keep it going straight, 90 degrees. Going to move this curve to where it is as close to the center as I can reasonably make it. The truth is that this image is not perfectly symmetrical. There's parallax involved. This was photographed in Central Park many years ago, and it's the bridge there at the rowboat pond. And because it's from a photograph and the camera wasn't perfectly parallel to the surface, you have slight distortion. Going to do an offset curve through point both sides. That would be, do that again slower. Through point both sides. I use keyboard shortcuts all the time. Land these two offset curves at the outside of that frame. Going to do a horizontal, same way I did the vertical. Line, straight line both sides, shift key for ortho. Going to move it straight down to about there. That's fine. I could move it there. If I wanted to, I could move it down to here. It doesn't really matter. It depends on how much I want to trace. We're going to be tracing this central element. Going to offset that curve to catch the bottom of the picture. And that's that. I will now lock the layer that the drawing is on, that the photograph is on. Select all the curves I've done. Use intersect snap and draw a rectangle corner to corner. I don't want to delete the center line, so I'll right click to remove that, or control click I should say, to remove that, and then hit delete. And that will remove the reference curves. I'll unlock this now, grab everybody here, and move, center snap. I will touch the center of the rectangle I drew, and then move to 0. and relock that background bitmap. And now that's fairly well centered in my drawing. I'm going to start drawing some elements here. I'm going to start by drawing this arc. Turn on my near snap. Draw a straight line from here. Now that's one way I could do that. I showed that in class. Another way I could do that is line perpendicular from curve. What I need is a straight line over here so that when I extend a curve from it, I'm getting an arc, a true arc that'll be smooth and symmetrical when I mirror it. Extend by arc to point. Until I hit enter, this command will allow me to keep drawing. I always take my curves beyond the end of where I need them to be. Explode this, control click to remove the parent curve, rejoin these together into a single curve, throw this away, and I will rebuild this curve. Because right now it's a polycurve. Whenever you do extend by arc to point, each extension is a separate curve. If I explode this right now, you can see there are 4 segments. Okay, so I don't ever want a polycurve. Never have a polycurve in your drawing unless it's at a corner. Along a smooth segment of curve, never have a polycurve. It'll be carried over into your surfacing, and it will really adversely affect your model. So, going to rebuild, which is right here. Right now it's a 9-2. It's a 2 because it's an arc. I'm going to take it to 4th degree. I don't need 15 points. I can probably get by with about 8. What this number is going to be, you will discover from experience. Very short curves or very simple curves can get by with lower numbers. Longer, more convoluted curves need higher numbers. I'm going to turn on my grid, my curve analysis grid, or graph I should say. Boost the scale to where I can see what's going on there. Turn on the points, which is, you can find it in several places. But I'm going to go to curve, edit points, turn on points, control points, turn on points. But it's easiest to always use the keyboard shortcut. So F10. I want to make sure I have that smoothness with a straight line. To do that, I'm going to move this first point directly on top of the end point. Leave it selected, because if I click on it, if I click in the background now, I'll never know which one it is, because it's right on top, right? So that's why I make sure I don't click anywhere in the background. I just let it sit there. And repeat the command. Shift and drag. You'll notice I do not use gumball. I almost never use gumball. This is the Rhino M move command, M enter, which I'm entering with my keyboard. Taking a look at the image in the background, taking a look at the curvature graph, and that's good. I do want to demonstrate what I'm talking about here being smooth. In Rhino, whenever you have 3 points in a straight line, you have a straight segment of your curve. I can demonstrate that. This is not part of the homework. This is just me adding information. So you don't need to click along with me here. But I can come up here and drop that point on the straight line and this point onto the straight line. And what I have here is a little bit of straightness. Oh, actually, it's a 4th degree curve. Never mind, it's going to require more than that. third degree curve, that would have been sufficient. There we go, by adding one more point. I have a slight segment of straightness there. So that's the same idea here. By putting in that straight segment, by dragging it over and sliding it out, I ensure that it'll be smooth going across. Next curve. My favorite sketching tool is Interpolate curves. Interpolate curve. So I'm going to just click and draw. Make it longer than I need. Turn off, disable these object snaps. I don't really care how accurate I am here. I'm not going to be sloppy on purpose, but if it isn't perfect, I don't mind. Once again, it is important. And to end each curve, I'm hitting Enter, which I always use the space bar for. That's pretty good. Okay, so that's enough to get this piece done. So I'm going to now come in, I'm going to turn on the control points, adjust them a little bit if I see something that's way out of whack. I often don't like these points that are close to the end because they're there to control, to anchor the curve for its tangency, its directionality. If there was another curve over here, the same idea of what we were talking about here, that would matter. It's that same principle that Rhino's trying to impose. But it doesn't really harm it to remove that point, and I often do that second to the end point because it just makes adjusting the curve easier. Same thing here. Same thing here. That actually looks pretty good. This curve. It looks okay until I get about here. Now there are not enough control points for me to really do justice to this little knob. But that's it. Now if I want to make sure they're extra nice, I can turn the curvature graph on and rebuild them. Right now it's 8.3. I'm going to make it into an 8.4. Because remember, third degree curves always have a kink in them somewhere, or at least almost always. If they have more than very few points. So you can see there's a kink right here in that curve. There's a kink right here. You can see the sharp corners. If I rebuild that, anything that curves around like that's going to be at least 20 points. It comes around in a curl if it's a large curve like this. So I'm going to give it 20 points. Take a look at it. That's good. You'll see all of those kinks went away. Just going to make sure I only have the one highlighted so it's easier to see. Back down the scale a little bit, and now I can turn the points on and I can do point adjusting to get this curvature graph smoother. I'm not even going to bother down in here. I don't have enough points. That's actually more points than it needs. That's 7. I'm going to take it down to 6. Graph looks good. Don't go crazy with this unless your final work is a drawing, which for our homework it is. Now, if you're going to model this, I get these as nice as I can. Reasonably. That's 6.4. That's probably not going to be enough for this curve. I'll go up to 9. Even though it's the same length, because there's a pretty drastic curl or curve at the end, it's going to want to have control points in place to manage. That's fine. This looks pretty good. I'm going to just see if I can rebuild it to a 4 and keep it looking good. 4th degree curve. Looks fine. So now the last thing for drawing this section is the offset curve. I'm going to do one here. And I'm going to do one here. Now, to do those, I'm going to want to do that through point option, which I just do T-enter for. I do it automatically. It's almost never do I do an offset curve without doing through point. Now you'll see it failed right there. That's because of where I clicked. There wasn't enough room in the center to have that be successful. So if I click over here, it threw away that bit. It's fine. This is good as it is, although notice how crazy it gets in here. And because this was carved by hand, there's an unfortunate sort of buckling of the curve right there, which we do not need to replicate. However, here, this is a nice gradual taper, and I want to keep that. So I'm going to rebuild this curve. To curl, 20 points, slightly less. I can go with 17, I think. Turn on the points. Get rid of that second to the end point, and get rid of that second to the end point. Go ahead and put on my curvature graph, because I know I'm going to want it. May as well do both things at once. Going to move this because I want it to overlap. Always you want overlap. And here it really widens. There, that's good. Good enough. This curve, I want to have a little more control over what's happening here, so I'm going to add points. You can actually rebuild curves multiple times while you're working with it, a curve, because you may want to control a big area and get it smooth. The fewer points, the smoother it's going to be. But then add more points. The excess points here won't hurt anything. It'll just give you more handles to get a hold of here. So rebuild it. It was 17. I'm going to take it up to 35. Seems like a good number. I'm going to turn on F10, and you can see that I have now plenty of points here. The curvature graph should not have been affected by adding points. You'll see it still stays pretty smooth. But now I can come up into here. And I have enough points to really finesse that. Okay, cleaning up a drawing, the best thing to use is fillet. Set the radius to 0, and that will trim the curves against each other. Make sure you click on the correct side. If you click on the outside here, it's going to take away what I want to keep. So be careful of where you click. Now see, I don't actually want to do that. I want to keep this curl overlapping. So what I'm going to do is select this curve and trim that curve off. There is something unfortunate happening here that's kind of straight and awkward. I'm going to put that curvature graph on one more time. Yes, you can see it right there. That's nicer. And that would be drawn except for trimming out overlaps, like right here. Okay? And then this would be mirrored over. And that would be good to go. Okay? That's all of the steps. Okay? I am going to do one more section. I am not going to really talk as much. I'm just going to click through so you have another chance to see this process being carried through. So, interpolate curve. Interpolate curve. Repeating commands is just enter. This could have been an offset curve, but there's enough variation in it I decided not to do that. Okay, that's enough. Quick adjustments. Looks pretty good, actually. That's fine. Too many points on there to see what's going on. I really curled this around and there was no reason to do that. Otherwise, that looks pretty good. A little awkward through there. Looks pretty good. Okay, like that. Gonna now rebuild these. Keyboard shortcut. I'm gonna say that's gonna need 14. That should be good with the same number. This is gonna need like 25. This is going to need 14. Should work again. This actually does a lot, so it's going to need a solid 20 or more. This curve is also pretty evolved. I'll give it 16. This is really a simple curve, so 6. Really simple, but it has kind of a sharp bump at the end. Give it one more point to control it. And actually, this should be fine with 7. So I've done that. Okay, I'm going to now turn on the curvature graph. Turn on my points. and sweeten things up a little if I feel like it needs it. That's good. Here's an example where that second to the anchor there at the end there was kind of cramping my style. I have near snap on over here, which is a problem. So I'm going to turn that off. Now somehow I've hit F8 and ortho got activated. And that is too much time already. This curve actually has too many points in it. I'm finding myself spending a lot of time trying to finesse it. And in the process of trying to finesse it, it's actually getting less smooth because there are too many points. It's an example of what it looks like when you get too many points. Okay, I'm going to take both of these, turn the points off on them, and make them a different color so I can tell when I have finished curves. Once again, since I'm going to want to do manipulating of this curve, it's a lot of points. It goes to show you, even with a lot of experience, sometimes you put in more than you need. However, there is a beauty of it, and that is that this time I do have enough points out here to come around and do a good job with the fall at the end of the scroll. Except for that point, which I don't like. That's good. I expect to see this swelling. That's fine. It just means the curve is kind of changing speed, becoming more gradual. That's fine. Remove those sub-anchor points. That looks pretty good. And that's fine. This curve shouldn't really need any work. It looks pretty good to me. I'm going to take a look. A little bit. That's good. That's good. Okay. So I have those curves. And now I'll clean it. Fillet curve. And then trim curves. Okay, you're going to mirror that over, so I'll lock the blue layer so I don't select it accidentally. Put these all on the same layer. And that's that. Now if I turn off the background bitmap, the picture frame, I should say, that's the tracing. Okay, so that's the homework. Trace that scene, that image, and that's it for now. Thanks for watching.